Have you ever felt trapped in a system that seems designed to keep you down, no matter how hard you work? Imagine pouring your heart and soul into your job, only to discover that your very worth is measured in numbers, and that those numbers are stacked so unfairly against you. Today, I'm sharing the unfiltered, raw story of Imani, a brilliant, determined professional who dared to challenge a corporate machine rigged against her. This is a story of grit, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice that will not only inspire you but also remind you that every battle for equality is worth fighting. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see your own struggles. Imani's alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence with a dull, persistent buzz. Her eyelids felt weighted as she forced herself out of bed, knowing that another grueling day at the office awaited. Every morning, she bore the invisible burden of responsibility, a burden that pressed on her shoulders as she navigated a world that never seemed to notice the quiet sacrifices of someone like her. As she walked through the deserted city streets toward the glass-paneled office building, the weight of her unspoken frustrations mingled with a flicker of hope that today might bring change. Inside the building, Imani was the first to arrive. The silence in the empty corridors was both soothing and isolating. She powered up her computer and opened the cascade of emails that awaited her. With practiced precision, she began to sift through urgent requests, correct mistakes overlooked by others, and compile detailed reports that should have been someone else's responsibility. Her desk was a battleground of multiple projects, mentoring sessions with junior staff, and the constant need to calm anxious clients. Despite the ceaseless demands on her expertise, recognition remained a scarce commodity in a company where effort was expected and excellence was met with indifference. As the morning wore on, subtle offenses began to accumulate like tiny wounds. A coworker complimented Imani on her eloquence during a presentation, as though such a trait was a rare anomaly rather than a natural part of who she was. Moments later, another colleague, with a casual disregard for personal boundaries, reached out to touch her hair and commented on how exotic it looked. Each seemingly innocuous comment piled up, serving as a constant reminder that in this predominantly white corporate environment, Imani was seen as different, an outsider in her own workplace. During a quiet pause in her hectic routine, Imani's ears caught snippets of a hushed conversation emanating from a distant office. Two senior managers were discussing salary negotiations. The figures they casually mentioned were startlingly higher than what Imani had ever been offered. Her heart began to race as she strained to catch every word. Could it be that the inequities she had long suspected were not just whispers in her mind? The seed of doubt was planted, and it quickly took root in her thoughts. The following morning, with a steaming mug of coffee in hand and determination in her eyes, Imani prepared herself for another demanding day. However, the memory of those overheard salary figures lingered like an unyielding specter. As she glanced around the open-plan office, her eyes landed on Tyler, a charming, affable colleague whose easy smile had once sparked hope and admiration in her heart. Over the past few months, Tyler and Imani had grown closer, their casual chats blossoming into a tentative, yet deeply meaningful connection. Today, though, that connection was about to be tested. Unable to suppress her burning need for clarity, Imani found herself leaning against Tyler's desk. Her fingers drummed nervously along its edge as she cautiously broached the subject. "Tyler," she began softly, "I need to ask you something about the salaries here. I overheard something last week, and I can't shake the feeling that something's terribly wrong." Tyler's eyes darted around the room as though fearful of unseen eavesdroppers. His hands fidgeted, and the pen he was holding tumbled to the floor. After a long, tense pause, he leaned in and lowered his voice. "Imani. I don't know how to say this, but, it turns out my salary is double yours." The words hit her like a sledgehammer, each syllable reverberating with injustice. With disbelief and pain mingling in her gaze, Imani managed to choke out, "Double? How can that be possible?" Tyler's expression was a cocktail of guilt and resignation as he murmured, I always assumed that with all you do for the company, you were being valued accordingly, but apparently, things aren't as they seem." The revelation ignited a fierce determination in Imani. "Tyler, this changes everything," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and resolve. "We need to look into this further. If this is happening across the board, then we can't stand by and let it continue." Tyler's hand found hers in a tentative gesture of solidarity. "We'll figure this out together," he promised, though the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed the gravity of their situation. That afternoon, as the golden light of dusk filtered through the office windows, Imani pored over financial reports and spreadsheets with painstaking attention to detail. Tyler sat beside her, his brow furrowed in concentration as they compared data, searching for patterns that might reveal a systemic issue. And then, the numbers began to paint a grim picture. Across various departments, women, especially women of color, were consistently earning less than their male counterparts. The evidence was undeniable. Imani's hands trembled as she uncovered yet another file. "Look at Tara from marketing," she whispered urgently. "She's been with the company for 10 years, holds an MBA, and yet she earns less than someone who just started last month." Tyler's shock was palpable. This is beyond unbelievable," he muttered, rubbing his temples as he tried to process the scale of the injustice. The statistics weren't just numbers on a screen, they were the embodiment of shattered dreams, stifled potential, and the untold struggles of countless women who had been denied the recognition and fair compensation they deserved. Imani's mind flashed to memories of her mother, who had faced similar battles in her own career. The realization that nothing had fundamentally changed over the years filled her with a burning mix of sadness and determination. "We need more evidence," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "If we're going to confront HR, we have to be absolutely certain of our facts." Tyler nodded in agreement. "We need to expose this, not just for us, but for every woman who's been overlooked and undervalued." Yet, as they continued to compile their findings, an unsettling feeling crept over Imani. She couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. Colleagues' glances lingered a moment too long, and whispered conversations died as she approached. It was as though the office itself was conspiring to silence their pursuit of truth. One afternoon, as Imani steeled herself for another confrontation, she summoned the courage to step into the intimidating office of the company's HR head. The door opened to reveal Ms. Hamilton, always impeccably composed, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Imani, please come in," Ms. Hamilton said in a voice as smooth as silk. Taking a seat across a massive mahogany desk, Imani's heart pounded as she tried to steady her shaking hands. "Ms. Hamilton, I need to talk to you about some alarming salary discrepancies I've uncovered. I have concrete evidence that women, particularly women of color, are being paid significantly less than their male colleagues, even when performing the same work." For a long moment, Ms. Hamilton's face was unreadable. Then, with a fleeting expression of annoyance quickly masked by false sympathy, she replied, "Imani, you're obviously very passionate about this, but sometimes, when we don't have the full picture, it's easy to jump to conclusions." Her tone, patronizing and dismissive, only fanned the flames of Imani's frustration. "I've looked at the data, Ms. Hamilton," Imani insisted, "and even after accounting for every possible factor, there's still an undeniable gap. In some cases, it's as much as 50%. Ms. Hamilton's smile tightened imperceptibly before she leaned back in her chair, exuding an aura of authority. "Imani, I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but I can assure you it doesn't represent the complete picture. Our salary determinations are based on complex algorithms and proprietary metrics. It isn't something that can be easily understood without full access to all the data." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added in a condescending tone, "And let me remind you that discussing salaries is against company policy. I wouldn't want to see your career prospects suffer because of such inappropriate behavior." The subtle thread in Ms. Hamilton's words sent a shudder down Imani's spine. Desperation warred with indignation as she attempted to steer the conversation back to the evidence before her, but every attempt was deftly deflected by Miss Hamilton's carefully rehearsed responses. By the time Imani left the office, her head was spinning with a maelstrom of doubt and dismay. What had seemed like clear-cut evidence just hours before now appeared clouded by corporate rhetoric. Later that day, a small beacon of hope arrived in the form of a text message. "Hey, you okay? I saw you coming out of HR. Want to grab a coffee?" It was from Tyler. Their meeting at a quiet corner booth provided a brief respite from the oppressive atmosphere at work. Tyler's concerned gaze met Imani's, and she poured out every detail of her meeting with Ms. Hamilton, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration, self-doubt, and mounting anger. Tyler listened intently, his expression darkening with each revelation. "Imani, you can't let them gaslight you like this," he urged gently. "We both know what the data says. The numbers don't lie." His words, filled with conviction, sparked a renewed sense of purpose within her. Their conversation soon turned to strategies, how they might bring together other women who had suffered similar injustices. "Tyler, we can't keep suffering in silence," Imani declared. "We need to talk to our colleagues, gather more evidence, and stand united." Tyler's eyes lit up with determination. "You're one of the strongest people I know, Imani. If anyone can bring us together, it's you." Despite the hope his words offered, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered caution. Yet, the thought of solidarity in change was too powerful to ignore. The very next day, Imani approached her colleagues one by one, inviting them to a secret meeting during the lunch break. In the cramped break room, beneath the anxious hum of whispered conversations, a fragile alliance began to take shape. One by one, women recounted their own experiences, stories of overlooked promotions, demeaning remarks from superiors, and the crushing pressure to be twice as good for half the recognition. The atmosphere shifted from one of fear to one of shared anger and determination. "We need to gather as much evidence as we can," one colleague insisted, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Salary slips, performance reviews, anything that proves this pattern of discrimination." Nods of agreement rippled through the group as they formulated a plan that, if successful, could bring down the oppressive system from within. However, even as this newfound solidarity began to kindle hope, the sense of paranoia in the office grew. Imani couldn't shake the feeling that every step she took was being watched. Glances from the hallway lingered too long, and whispered conversations fell silent whenever she approached. It wasn't long before the company's surveillance tightened its grip. Her computer inexplicably froze at crucial moments, and the subtle hum of voices seemed to crescendo into something ominous. The weight of secrecy was beginning to take its toll, and Imani often found herself checking over her shoulder, her nerves frayed by the constant threat of discovery. One particularly unsettling afternoon, as Imani's heart pounded in her chest, she opened her email to find a message with an urgent subject line from Mr. Anderson, the company's imposing and enigmatic boss. The message demanded her presence in his office the following morning to discuss some concerns. Anxiety churned in her stomach. With trembling hands, she swiped her badge at the building's entrance, only to be met with a harsh red light and an abrupt buzzing sound. A security guard approached, his expression impassive. "Miss Imani, I need you to come with me," he said in a tone devoid of emotion. Before she could protest, Imani was escorted to a small conference room where Ms. Hamilton sat waiting, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm on the table. The HR director's smile was brittle, her eyes icy. "I must admit, Imani," she began coolly, "I thought you'd last a bit longer before making such regrettable decisions." Imani's breath caught in her throat as the gravity of the situation became apparent. "What do you mean?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. Ms. Hamilton's tone was dismissive as she continued, "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation. Please hand over your company phone and laptop." The words were delivered with a finality that left no room for negotiation. As Imani was led from the building, she caught fleeting glances of her colleagues. Some averted their eyes in shame, others watched with a mix of pity and fear. Among them, she thought she saw a flicker of guilt cross Tyler's face before he turned away. The betrayal stung deeply. The man who had once been her rock, her partner in this fight for justice, now seemed to be complicit in her downfall. Outside, as she made her way home in a daze, her phone buzzed with supportive messages. "Stay strong, we're with you. Don't give up, the truth will come out." Yet, even as these words offered solace, the crushing weight of loss and isolation threatened to overwhelm her. That night, in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Imani sat amidst a mess of notes and documents, each piece of evidence a testament to the injustice she had uncovered. The reality was stark. She had been on the outside looking in all along. In a moment of despair mixed with steely resolve, she picked up her phone and called a trusted reporter. The conversation was measured yet electric, as she recounted every detail: the systemic pay gap, the microaggressions, the retaliatory measures, and the betrayal by those she had once trusted. Her voice, at once raw and resolute, carried the weight of months of struggle and sacrifice. Within days, the story broke across major news outlets. Headlines screamed, "Corporate whistleblower exposes systemic discrimination." Social media erupted with hashtags demanding justice. Yet, amidst the tidal wave of support, there were also voices of cynicism, accusations that she was just doing it for attention or that her claims were a scam. The company's response was swift and ruthless, a statement denying every allegation, painting Imani as a disgruntled troublemaker spreading baseless rumors, accompanied by veiled legal threats meant to silence her. As the days turned into weeks, Imani's life became an inescapable media spectacle. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison of judgment and fear. Every knock at the window sent her heart racing, and every unfamiliar phone call filled her with dread. In the midst of this chaos, an unexpected email arrived, a plain manila envelope delivered to her doorstep. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note: "The truth goes deeper than you know. Be careful who you trust." The note, penned in handwriting that was achingly familiar yet unplaceable, sent a chill down her spine. Trembling, she spread the documents across her coffee table. Financial reports, personnel files, recordings of secret meetings, all pointed to a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of the company. At its center was a name she had never suspected: Mr. Anderson, the very man whose urgent summons had set this chain of events in motion. In the ensuing days, strange occurrences continued to plague her. Her computer froze during critical moments, and even Tyler's behavior began to shift, his once warm demeanor replaced by a distracted, almost nervous energy. Then, on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday afternoon, Imani's email chimed with a new message. The subject read, "Meeting request, urgent." Her stomach sank as she read the terse message. The next morning, she arrived at the office building with a sense of foreboding. The familiar glass doors now loomed like the entrance to a fortress. After another failed badge scan and an admonishing word from the security guard, she was ushered into a conference room where Ms. Hamilton awaited her once more. In that cold, sterile room, Ms. Hamilton's tone was as icy as ever. "I must admit, Imani, I expected you to last longer before reaching this point," she said, her voice laced with condescension. "You are now suspended, pending further investigation. Your company devices will be collected immediately." The finality in her words was unmistakable. As Imani left the building for the last time that day, her heart felt as though it had been shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The faces of her colleagues blurred together, some offering pity, others turning away in fear. And in that moment, she couldn't help but wonder if anyone would stand with her in the fight for justice. At home, the relentless barrage of notifications and sympathetic messages offered little solace. In the quiet hours of the night, as she paced her living room, Imani's thoughts oscillated between rage and despair. She recalled every slight, every microaggression, every moment when her competence had been questioned solely because of who she was. And yet, amidst the crushing weight of injustice, a stubborn spark of determination refused to be extinguished. With trembling fingers hovering over her phone's call button, she knew that there was no turning back. The company would come for her with everything they had, but if it came to that, she would fight back, even if it meant sacrificing her career, her reputation, and perhaps even her life. The next chapter of Imani's battle unfolded in a whirlwind of interviews and legal maneuvers. A prominent reporter, whose calm professionalism belied a deep-seated hunger for the truth, began to probe into her story. Every revelation was met with pointed questions, and every piece of evidence was scrutinized until it shone with the clarity of undeniable truth. Days turned into sleepless nights as Imani's world blurred into a haze of media appearances and legal consultations. All the while, the company's response grew more aggressive. A carefully worded corporate statement dismissed her claims as baseless rumors, and legal threats dripped from every communication. Then, as if the mounting pressures were not enough, an old nemesis resurfaced with a proposition that promised to upend everything. The email arrived just hours before Imani's scheduled television appearance, its subject line reading, "Urgent Meeting Request." The sender's name sent a jolt of anxiety through her, Ms. Hamilton. The meeting was to be held at a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of the city. Hesitantly, Imani made her way to the designated address, her mind reeling with uncertainty about whether she could trust the HR head who had once dismissed her concerns so callously. Inside the cafe, the low hum of conversation provided a deceptive backdrop to the tension that crackled in the air. Imani slid into a secluded booth across from Ms. Hamilton, whose eyes, for once, betrayed a hint of regret. "Thank you for coming, Imani," Ms. Hamilton began softly. "I can't be a part of what's happening here any longer. Everything, the data manipulation, the suppression of truth, it's all wrong. I can't continue to support this system." Her voice was fragile, laden with the weight of years spent betraying her own ideals. "You must understand," she continued, "that I was once like you, passionate, determined to make a difference. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that, and I became complicit in a system that values profit over people." The confession, raw and unguarded, sent a shiver down Imani's spine. "Why now?" Imani asked, her voice steady despite the tumult inside her. "Because watching you fight, watching you stand up for what's right, reminded me of who I once was, and who I should have always been." Their conversation, though brief, planted the seeds of hope for Imani. It was a bittersweet moment of truth in a world rife with deception. Yet, even as Ms. Hamilton's confession opened a door to potential redemption, another twist was waiting in the wings. That very same week, Mr. Anderson, the company's formidable boss, summoned Imani to his sleek, intimidating office. The modern, polished space was a stark contrast to the chaos of her life, and as she sat before him, Imani couldn't help but feel that this meeting was a carefully constructed trap. Mr. Anderson slid a thick folder across the desk, his smile as sharp and insincere as ever. "Imani, your work has been nothing short of exceptional," he said smoothly. "In fact, we've been considering you for a promotion for some time now. This new position comes with full benefits, stock options, and a salary that I believe will make everything competitive." His tone was saccharine, but the underlying implication was clear: accept this golden leash and the company's oppressive hold would be yours to endure, or refuse and face the consequences. Imani's eyes flickered over the folder, her heart pounding as she weighed her options. The offer was tempting, but the timing was too convenient, a distraction designed to silence her fight for justice. "I need time to consider this offer," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Anderson nodded, his eyes cold and calculating. "Take all the time you need, Imani. But remember, opportunities like this don't come along every day." The very next day, the fragile alliance that Imani had built with her colleagues began to crumble. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers and hushed conversations. At a trendy restaurant during a rare night off, Imani's heart nearly stopped when she saw Tyler seated intimately with Ms. Hamilton. The sight, a tender, seemingly intimate gesture as Tyler caressed Ms. Hamilton's cheek, cut through Imani like a jagged shard of glass. For a moment, the world around her dissolved into a blur of stunned silence and heartache. Unable to tear her eyes away, she watched as the pair left together in a waiting cab, leaving her alone on the cold sidewalk, her soul aching with betrayal. Determined to confront the man who had once been her pillar of support, Imani sought Tyler out as soon as she could. Their meeting took place on a quiet street corner, the night air heavy with unsaid words. "Tyler," she began, her voice trembling with a cocktail of pain and anger, "I need you to be honest with me. What happened? How could you do this after everything we've been through?" Tyler's eyes, once full of promise, now betrayed a hardened resignation. "Imani, I never meant for it to come to this," he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his guilt. "I thought I could balance everything, that I could have it all, the career, the recognition, and even a little bit of personal gain." His words, laced with a chilling practicality, left Imani reeling. "So you chose them over me," she whispered, barely able to comprehend the betrayal. Tyler's shoulders sagged as he reluctantly admitted, "I made a choice that I now regret. I'm sorry, Imani. I never wanted to hurt you." But his apology rang hollow, a bitter reminder that ambition and self-interest had stolen away the loyalty they once shared. The fallout from that confrontation was swift and brutal. Emotions ran high as Imani's personal pain merged with the public battle she was waging against a corrupt system. The courtroom became the next arena in which her fight was to be contested. Facing a barrage of aggressive cross-examinations from the company's attorney, Ms. Peterson, Imani found herself painted as an opportunist, a troublemaker looking to profit from false allegations. Ms. Peterson's questions were barbed and relentless. "Isn't it true," she sneered, "that your performance reviews have always exceeded expectations, and that your only shortcoming was the company's failure to recognize diverse talent?" Imani's reply was measured, her voice unwavering despite the personal attacks. "I have always strived for excellence. The issue isn't my performance, it's the systemic bias that has undermined the contributions of so many talented individuals." Just when it seemed the scales of justice were tipping against her, a dramatic twist unfolded. In a moment of unexpected defiance, Imani's lawyer called a surprise witness to the stand, none other than Ms. Hamilton. The courtroom fell into a hush as the former HR head took the stand, her face etched with years of regret and quiet desperation. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling yet resolute, "I can no longer stand by and be complicit in a system that devalues people like Imani. I was once as passionate about justice as she is, but I lost my way. I made choices that I now deeply regret." With every word, Ms. Hamilton peeled back layers of deceit, exposing not only the company's discriminatory practices but also the sordid details of her own long-standing affair with Tyler, a secret that had corroded the very foundation of trust within the organization. As testimony after testimony unfolded, the weight of the evidence became undeniable. The jury, once swayed by the corporate legal machine's jargon and technicalities, began to see the human cost of systemic discrimination. Imani's voice, though scarred by betrayal and exhaustion, rang out with the clarity of truth. Finally, after days of relentless legal warfare, the verdict was read. The company was found accountable for years of discriminatory practices, and damages were awarded to Imani for the emotional and financial toll they had inflicted. But victory, as it often does, came at an unbearable personal cost. In the courtroom's aftermath, Imani's strength faltered. The emotional and physical strain of the battle proved too much, her body crumpled under the weight of her sacrifice, and soon she found herself in a stark hospital room, surrounded by harsh fluorescent lights and the steady beeping of monitors. In that sterile space, as she lay weak and fragile, a familiar face appeared at her bedside. Miss Hamilton, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears, reached out a trembling hand. "I'm so sorry, Imani," she whispered, her voice thick with remorse. "I lost my way long ago, and I allowed my own ambitions to betray everything I once believed in. I see now that I made choices that hurt you, and so many others. Please, can you ever forgive me?" In that moment, as the two women shared a silent understanding of loss, betrayal, and the high cost of truth, Imani felt an unexpected warmth amid the pain, a spark of hope that even the deepest wounds could someday begin to heal. The journey that had begun with a single, defiant question had culminated in a battle for justice that transcended the confines of a single company. Imani's story, raw and unyielding, reverberated far beyond the courtroom walls. It became a rallying cry for every individual who had ever felt voiceless, overlooked, or oppressed. Though the scars of betrayal and injustice would remain with her, Imani vowed that her fight would not end here. With every challenge, every setback, she resolved to continue standing up for what was right, fighting not just for herself, but for the countless others who deserved the chance to be seen, heard, and valued. As you listen to this story, know that the struggle for fairness and equality is not confined to the pages of a legal battle or the glare of the media spotlight. It lives in every moment of courage when someone refuses to accept the status quo. Imani's journey is a reminder that while the road may be long and filled with obstacles, every step taken in the name of justice is a victory in itself. So, whether you're fighting a personal battle or standing up against a larger injustice, remember this: your voice matters, your courage is powerful, and together, we can build a future where fairness isn't just an ideal, but a reality for everyone. In the end, as Imani slowly recovered in that cold hospital room, her mind began to piece together the fragments of her shattered world. Outside, the city bustled on obliviously, unaware of the revolution that had been ignited in a single fight for dignity. With each passing day, she gathered strength from the memories of the injustice she had endured and the solidarity of those who had joined her cause. Though the scars of betrayal, especially the painful revelations about Tyler's duplicity, would remain, she found solace in the knowledge that the truth had finally emerged from the shadows. And with that truth came the power to transform not only her life, but the very fabric of an unjust system. Imani's story is not just a chronicle of corporate betrayal and legal victory, it is a testament to the indomitable human spirit, a spirit that, even when battered by the relentless forces of discrimination and deceit, refuses to surrender. It's a call to action for anyone who has ever felt diminished by the very system they help to uphold. So let Imani's journey inspire you: stand up, speak out, and never let anyone silence the truth that burns inside you.